Boston College and Louisville, a weeknight game on Friday night at Chestnut Hill. Who we got in this one? You're going to have to wait and hear.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is a special Locked On Boston College and Locked On Louisville crossover episode. I'm your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. I'm your host, AJ Black. I am the host of Locked On Boston College. And to join us to get ready for Friday's game, we have Dalton Pence of Locked On Louisville. Dalton, how's it going?
It's going, man. How are you?
Hey, can't complain here. Well, I could complain because it's been a rough couple weeks for the Eagles. They just got smoked last Thursday against Virginia Tech. But I got to say, it probably still feels pretty crummy about that loss against Miami. That was a tough loss, too, for Louisville.
Yeah, just some mistakes in that one that prevented Louisville from winning. I mean, scoring 45 points and losing is still a tough pill to swallow nonetheless.
45 points for Boston College is two plus games right now, the way that they're playing. So let's talk about this. Today's episode, we're going to talk, give a chance for Dalton to talk about what Louisville has to do to win. I'm going to talk about what BC has to do to win, and then we'll give our predictions. How's that sound out there, folks? Sound good? All right, that's what we're going to do here. All right, Dalton, tell me what Louisville has to do to win this game.
Well, I think for starters, it has to be getting going early. That's been sort of the Achilles heel for this team throughout the duration of the season, which is completely different than how this team performed last year with a lot of the same pieces, especially defensively. The game against Miami was the fourth straight game in which, actually, let me take that back, fifth straight game in which Louisville really just came out unprepared defensively, just no answers for the opposing offense. I'd had to go back and look at it, but I believe that each of the offenses that they played in this 5-week stretch have all scored at some point in their first drive, whether it be a touchdown or a field goal. So it has to be getting going early defensively, not letting Thomas Castellanos and company just go right down the field and either put yourself into a deficit early on, or if your offense scores, then, having to kind of go back and forth. And then offensively, you need Tyler Shough to get going, build that confidence on the road. I know Boston College isn't known for having one of the top atmospheres in the country, but still, it's a Friday night game in conference play, so things can be a little challenging. And it's just a weird place to play for Louisville because they've never really played good there. So I think it starts with getting started early for the Cardinals.
So it's interesting you bring that up. Under Bill O'Brien, the fan base has actually kind of responded to BC, and
I actually love that. I love that a lot.
Yeah, so like the Michigan State game was red bandana earlier this year. It was disgusting out. It was pouring. It was gross, and they still packed the place, which they would never. If it was Jeff Hafley, that place would have been half empty. Now Tyler Shough in this offense, we saw last year in one of those games where it looked like, and I'd have to look at the stats. I don't have them in front of me. If I remember correctly, it felt as a Boston College observer that Louisville scored on every single drive in that game. They were just pounding BC. What changes in the offense from Jack Plummer to Tyler Shough should we expect, and what similarities are going to be obvious to BC fans?
Well, I mean, Jack Plummer, you knew what you were going to get. He granted, I say that he didn't make many mistakes, but the reality is that he did. He just didn't really take many chances. Louisville didn't throw the ball deep a ton. It was one of those they dink and dunk down the field, and running the ball was their bread and butter. Tyler Shough has been incredible this season for Louisville, and he's been healthy. That's been the main thing. They're airing the ball out. Ja'Cory Brooks has been every bit as good as advertised, probably better. Just overall, the team is more explosive. The 4-3 record, it's deceiving against the offense because Louisville's offense has really not been the problem outside of maybe a game or two, but seemingly against Miami, they figured some things out. So you're going to see Louisville just take more shots deep. Tyler Shough loves throwing the ball. He's going to test the Boston College secondary, and it's going to be up to the Boston College pass rush to take advantage of sort of a subpar offensive line from Louisville.
That's scary because you get Donovan Azaraku, who I'll talk about on my segment, and the BC front defensive line has just been it almost is non-existent. I think is the word that you want to
Which
think
is
about.
wild to me because
Yeah.
I was really excited to see Azaraku play this year. But I think it goes hand to hand because Louisville's defensive line has also been rather subpar. So I think that kind of leads me perfectly into the second key to the game, and that's containing Thomas Castellanos. Louisville has not had a single answer for rushing quarterbacks this year, even mobile quarterbacks. I mean, the stretch there was a 4-game stretch with Haynes King, Riley Leonard, Kevin Jennings, and Anthony Calandria to where, yeah, they made some adjustments here and there, but for the most part, those 4 quarterbacks got whatever they wanted on the ground. And this was the matchup that always kind of scared me because Castellanos is one of those controlled chaos type quarterbacks where he improvises so well. So I can see that really being a thorn in Louisville's side. And then Boston College, but the thing about it is their offensive line is really not doing a great job of protecting Castellanos, despite that mobility, 3rd worst in the ACC in giving up sacks. So you just have to be able to, number one, contain him and not go too far upfield. But number 2, turn the quarterback pressures into sacks because that's been something that Louisville's really not been great at this year.
And I look at your defensive line, and I go back to BC's game against them last year, and I'm going to probably butcher his name. It's Ashton Gelotte, right?
Gelati.
Gelati. I knew I was going to screw it up. 3 sacks against BC last year, and that arguably BC's offensive line was much improved in 2023 than they are now. You know, they lost 2 of their guards. I look at this year. You just watched what BC did against Virginia Tech, and Antoine Paul Ryland just. I mean, he felt like he had 4. I think he had 4 sacks. It felt like he had 20. He was back in the backfield. So you're saying Louisville's defensive line is just not as good as it was last year. They're just not producing at the level that they are, and they've just been struggling. Or
I think it's a lot to do with scheme. I think that Jeff Brom even said it. It's no secret that defensive coordinator has been a major issue for the Cardinals. A lot of it's not sending much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ashton Gelati was playing middle linebacker for a snap against Cam Ward this Saturday, if that shows you anything. Blitzed from the middle linebacker spot. But Brom basically mentioned that you got to make things more simple, and they have, but to what end? So on paper, there's no reason why this Louisville defensive line isn't getting as much push, but for whatever reason, that's just sort of the reality at this point.
Now, we got to go to our second segment in a second, but there's one player that I have not brought up with you that I want to talk about. My film guy, Mitch Wolf on Eagle Insider, he said, AJ, you got to watch Isaac Brown. This kid is something special. And I've seen him on lists for All-American freshmen. He compared him to LaMichael James, who used to play for Oregon.
I like that.
Right. Said this guy is speedy and he can cause a lot of trouble. Now, BC had a ton of trouble with Byshal Tootin last week. As someone who covers this team and talks about them all the time, tell me a little bit about this Isaac Brown guy.
Yeah, one of your typical 4-star Miami guys that has a ton of speed. South Florida is known for having that speed and agility. And, I mean, he is the epitome of that. I mean, he is fantastic with the ball in his hands. I went on record in August saying that he was the most talented running back on the team and that he would be starting by the later part of the season. Well, it looks like even my timeline was a little bit too late. Every time he's touched the ball, it feels like you just are waiting for a house call to happen. And you compare him to LaMichael James, maybe a more familiar name is Jawar Jordan from last year. They wear the same number. They're fairly similar in stature and body weight. Jordan might have better agility at the moment because he was quite older, but still he's a player that has shown really good vision. And when he hits those holes, you better get a good angle because he has the speed to really make things interesting. Now, AJ, before we go into the next segment, let me tell you, he had 9 carries last week. He did fumble the ball on about the Louisville 3-yard line. Miami recovered in the end zone for a touchdown. He didn't get much impact after that. There are concerns as to whether or not he got injured in that game. We don't know yet. So I don't want to put that out there. So fans listening, don't say, well, Dalton Penn said Isaac Brown was hurt. No, I'm just saying, for whatever reason, whether he was in the doghouse or he, got banged up, Jeff Brom did say that there are going to be some starting level players that might not play this week. I don't know who that is. So for now, we're going to at least acknowledge the possibility that, hey, Brown's availability might be hindered, but we don't know that yet.
So when we flip the script in a moment, I'll say the exact same thing about a key BC player that you're going to want to know about. So Dalton's going to ask me some questions about Boston College. We're going to get into what my thoughts are, some of the difficulties that BC's had. You're going to want to hear all that in just a moment. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out this latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, if you're a New England Patriots fan, this weekend, it's a home game against the New York Jets. The Jets are a favorite in this game. Both teams are playing absolutely putrid football. If you're looking to get some action, if you're a New England fan and you think that, hey, Drake May is going to actually turn this thing around, you can head over to FanDuel. If you're fading on this team because they've been a giant mess the last month and a half, you can go to FanDuel. That's what I do. I've been fading on the Pats hard. I'm a New England guy, but that's what I've been doing. You can also head over to FanDuel and get yourself $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Whether that's football, there's basketball just starting, hockey. It is packed to the gills with odds, props, anything you can think of. It's up on FanDuel, and you'll get your $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Get on there, download the app today. That's FanDuel.com. Locked On Boston College and Locked On Louisville here to do a crossover episode for Friday's game between the Boston College Eagles and Louisville Cardinals. Now, I have not been part of the ACC ACC squad. Dalton, have you been part of that? You have.
Yep, I have been. Yep.
Okay. I've always said
for a second.
I have said to my listeners, the only reason I have not been able to be part of it is because you guys record when I'm putting my kids to bed. So it's never something I can ever do. But check it out. A lot of my listeners have a lot of thoughts about what you guys are talking about on that show. So check out Locked On ACC Squad. Usually the episodes come out at the end of the week. They usually have a ton of ACC talk. Get that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Dalton, I will let you take it over and ask me some questions.
I think for starters, what Louisville fans want to know is, Boston College started the year out and it looked like things were going to be really promising. You beat a Florida State team. Now, granted, at the time, we didn't know what we know now about Mike Norvell's team, but then you also kind of validated yourselves with a pretty close game at Missouri. Now, granted, we didn't know then what we might know now with Missouri, but the last 2 weeks, loss at Virginia by 10 points, and then the blowout loss at Virginia Tech. What do you kind of look at as the core issues in both of those games, and are they something that you're worried about this week?
It's two big issues right here, Dalton. And the biggest one, and Bill O'Brien talked about it, extensively, and it's crept up in the last 2 weeks, has been turnovers. Thomas Castellanos, and I'm going to screw the stat up. I believe it was at one point in the Virginia Tech game, had turned the ball over on 5 of his last seven sets of downs. Drives, just putrid. The end of the UVA game, he gave up he just went back to pass, lost the ball in his hand, went right into Jonas Hanker's hands. He goes for a touchdown. Against Virginia Tech, they score. He fumbles it at like the 15-yard line of BC's. They get the ball back in the red zone. They score again. Game's basically over at that point. So it's the turnovers. They fumbled the ball. They put it down 3 times against the Hokies last week, and that's what caused them to lose. I mean, BC came back hard, but this issue is specifically the last couple of weeks has been the biggest problem for Boston College and is giving free points when they can't give away free points. They just can't. They're fumbling in their own red zone. They're fumbling in the opponent's red zone. So they're, losing points, giving away points. That has been a major problem for the Eagles. And Thomas Castellanos has got to figure that out because he has been the Achilles heel for this team, which is crazy to think about because he has been like the MVP for the last 2 years. Up until the last 2 weeks, you would say Thomas Castellanos is the most dangerous player on this team. Right now, he is the most dangerous player just on the other end of things because he's just so inconsistent right now. That's key one. The other one is the run defense. BC was top 15 in run defense up until the game against Virginia. and they found something against BC. They've been able to run it, and then Bijal Tootin and Chiron Drones too, just torched BC on the ground. They ran for over 300 yards, and that was a big problem. And now those were the two things Bill O'Brien has been stressing all week. He talked about that's got to be things that they got to fix. The big issue is their starting linebacker, Kam Arnold, left the game against Virginia Tech last week with something. We don't know what it is. He was at practice on Monday with a sling on. I saw that and went, that's not good. And Bill said today that it's a precautionary measure. I don't know. You never know with coaches, right? I would say you see something like that, you're like, at least a couple weeks he's going to be out. Yeah. He is a big, that's a big loss for BC, who already lost Amari Jackson, their starting cornerback, and they're thin. They're just a thin defense right now. It's something they've been preaching all year long. So you get all these two big issues, and it's just making this team disjointed. When things are clicking, you see what you saw in the third quarter against Virginia Tech. They scored 21 points, got 2 or 3 turnovers, and they look like world beaters, like you mentioned. But look at the other quarters, and they're a giant mess.
So when you kind of look at flipping this argument and saying, well, Boston College wins this game if blank, is it centered around the two things that you mentioned, or is there something more prevalent that we need to discuss as to how Boston College is going to win this game if they do?
So I will say yes. Like the non-starters, the turnovers, they're going to get blown out if they turn the ball over to Louisville like they did the last 2 weeks. They won't even be competitive. Mm-hmm. If they can get that under control, if they can keep the stupid fumbles, and Castellanos, he's only thrown 4 interceptions. It's not even the interceptions. It's just he's putting the ball on the ground.
Right.
It's not that, I think, is one big key, but the bigger key to me is consistently moving the ball, and that has to go with offensive coordinator Will Lawing. Like, they have a system that works. It's just been so inconsistent at times where it's like you got things working, and then they'll throw you'll watch this. Their screen game is one of the worst screen games I've ever seen, which is crazy coming from a guy that worked with Tom Brady, right? Like, that was like his bread and butter, right? Like, they cannot throw a screen. Every time it's blown up for a 3-yard loss, blown up. It's like, so then like these little issues that come up or a penalty here and then, they're usually not an issue with penalties, but they're so their drives get so junked up with one play that kind of stuff has to stop, because they got to be able to be a little bit more explosive than they have been. And so their ability to just continue to sustain drives, I think, is going to be something key. It's what they did to win a lot last year when they were winning, was they could keep drives going, and it just has not been there. And the big key you're going to watch, and Louisville fans are going to be surprised by this, against Virginia Tech, he did more of it, but Thomas Castellanos hasn't been as mobile as last year. That was his thing. He ran for 1,100 yards. He was all over the place. But Bill O'Brien comes in, and his whole thing for the last 6 months is he wants to teach him how to be a quarterback. Well, that's great. You took him out, taught him how to be a quarterback, which he is. He's better at that. But you also kind of neutered some of the explosiveness, and he's realizing that now. And he's like, we saw it against Virginia Tech where he'd run more, but there were weeks where against Michigan State, Western Kentucky didn't play. Sorry, Missouri, where he just would stand there and it's like, go run. This is what you do. But he's so much into his head now where I got to throw the ball. I got to be a quarterback. And so they're trying to, I think, kind of find that happy medium with him. If they can find that happy medium, I think that's going to make BC a more efficient team. And then the defense, they got to make some plays. They've been making plays, but they got to be more consistent about it.
Last question that I have, you go back to Castellanos. I find it pretty interesting, looking between last year and this year. I mean, he was a quarterback that kind of just relished the chaos factor, and that's how he kind of threw wrenches in people's plans. He had 57% completion percentage. Now you're up to about 67. That's a fairly significant jump. He's top 15 in the country in average yards of completion. It's like 15 yards a game. But I find it interesting, the dynamic, though, that it feels like, Bill O'Brien's trying to force him to stay in the pocket. When is he, when you look at the long-term prospect that is Thomas Castellanos, maybe not right now, long-term prospect, what's the maximum potential there? Like, what does that look like for him? Is it more pass first, run later? Is he more so of a Lamar type where it's just like, you're going to get yours on the ground, but you're still going to, like, what do you see the future looking like for Castellanos? Because all things go well for Bill O'Brien, this is a multiple year starter for him.
Right. And that's going to be the big question, right? Like where does he need to be the most efficient? Because you need to find some happy medium, because he can throw the ball. He can do that. He doesn't throw a lot of underneath stuff because he's 5'9" and tiny. But he can throw, like, when he rolls out and can see more of what he needs to see, he can throw it.
Right.
I think for Castellanos, my personal opinion is he's got to be able, I think he's got to be more run. I think he's got to be more like he was last year.
Fair.
I don't feel like you got Lewis Bond, who's a pretty good wide receiver, and they brought in some other guys. They brought in a kid from Vanderbilt who had 40 receptions last year, Jaden McGowan, who was supposed to be really fast. I think he played 2 snaps over the last 2 weeks. I don't know what Bill O'Brien doesn't like about him. Just never plays. So they brought in some and then they got Jerron Bradley, who is a 6'5" wide receiver from Texas Tech. Again, I think Jeff Hafley brought these guys in, but I thought they brought them in to give him more weapons, and they just aren't panning out. They're not. Either Bill O'Brien doesn't have the faith in them or they're not. So I go back to what has been their bread and butter for the last 2 years. Like, Thomas Castellanos is not going to be an NFL quarterback. He's too small. He's not Kyler Murray as much as people want to bring him up. He doesn't have the arm that he does. He's just not that. And you got to do what's best to win. And honestly, my opinion is the best way to win with this team is having Castellanos be the agent of chaos, as you mentioned, right? Just let him go. Just, when he's going, that offense can click. And I think he maybe has learned enough so he's not throwing the stupid interceptions that he threw last year. But I don't like seeing him sitting in the pocket, especially with the offensive line not as good as it's been. Like, he sits back there, and even with his speed, he's getting chased down by defensive ends because they're just flying off the line and getting at him. So that's why I see a game like this Louisville game, and I'm worried that if he does that, he's going to he almost got hurt against Virginia Tech. I think it could happen again.
Interesting. I think that's a very intriguing dynamic that, the football fan in me wanted to see more, but the fans listening now probably want to hear about what we think is going to happen on Friday.
Yeah. And in a moment, Dalton and I are going to give our predictions for the game. If you heard what I just said, you might think that I'm going to go one way, but maybe I'll surprise you. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Hi there. Thanks for being a valued Prize Pick listener here, because I want to tell you about Prize Picks. It's what I use, where you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the only way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, because you watch those games. What's the worst when you're going out there, you're putting, you're making a pick for your daily fantasy, and it's the guy goes down in the first quarter, a guy goes down in the second quarter. Prize Picks get insurance for that. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, free, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money as quick as 15 minutes. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that you can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineup. So think Justin Jefferson will get more than 83 yards next week. Christian McCaffrey, is he going to play? If he does, 75.5 yards, go to Prize Picks. They have it covered. You're going to love Prize Picks. And when you go to Prize Picks right now, use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 instantly. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 pick. That is a Prize Pick. This is Locked On Boston College and Locked On Louisville. We're wrapping things up here. I am joined by Dalton Pence. When you're done with this episode, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Great show. If you just want to get the landscape of everything with bowls, with the college football playoff, which BC and Louisville are looking on the outside in at this point. BC's not going to get there. You can check out Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, it's prediction times. I usually give it on my show with my co-host or my guest, Mitch Wolf, on Fridays, but I want to do it today with Dalton because it's an early week. We're going to get into it now. Dalton, you want to go first?
I suppose I will. I think that this is a game for both teams where each team just kind of desperately needs this, just to kind of revitalize the push towards the end of the year. Louisville obviously not meeting the expectations that was placed, on them by many in the fan base. A lot of people thought this was a playoff hopeful team. At this point, you're kind of just playing for pride. I do think that Louisville wins this game. I think that they bounce back because of kind of what you said. Boston College has been struggling with the turnovers. They're kind of swinging the wrong way at the moment in terms of the pendulum. And then you have sort of the rushing defense has kind of been the Achilles heel also, and Louisville has really tried to establish the run. Assuming Isaac Brown is good to go and healthy, that's going to help Louisville's chances. I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a messy game. It feels like when these two teams play, it's either a blowout or it's really close. And I unfortunately think this is going to be in the really close category. I think Louisville wins. Louisville's a 7.5-point favorite on FanDuel. I'm going to say score prediction. I'm going to say 35-31. I think it's going to be a lot closer for comfort than some. And that's because at this point, Louisville's defense has just got to show me something for me to believe that it can be any more than that.
So yeah, I was going to ask you what your thoughts are on the FanDuel line, and you're going with it. So I am much more pessimistic for BC's chances in this one because I've watched enough. I think the injuries are piling up on the defense at the wrong time. Losing Kam Arnold, you're going to put Owen McGowan out there, who is a definite downgrade in terms of experience and athleticism. And against a guy like Isaac Brown and Louisville's just built with speed compared to what BC has. I think you are onto something, and you'll see on Friday night. I think the fans will it's homecoming. It's going to be a big game for them. Right. They're going to get up. So there's a possibility that this could be close. I'm playing Debbie Downer here. I'm going to have Louisville winning by like 38-20. I'm going to have them winning pretty comfortably in this one because I feel like the explosives are going to hit. I'm worried that Castellanos is going to start off slow. And if he makes a few turnovers, this game can get out of hand fast. So I'm going to go with the Cardinals winning comfortably by 18 points. And that's my bottom line. I'm sticking to it. I don't know.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Yeah. What are your thoughts just before we go? What is your hopes for the Cardinals for the rest of the season?
Well, it's kind of a really challenging portion. I mean, you have at Clemson, who, in my opinion, is the best team in the ACC. And I've said that on Locked On ACC Squad that we all kind of be a part of from here or here and there. I should say I'm not on it every week. You have Pittsburgh, who right now is undefeated at Kentucky. No matter how good or bad they may be, they always get up for the Louisville game. With 5 games left to go, I think the focus should be on winning 3 of those games. Kind of sucks to say, but I think 7-5 is probably the most likely outcome. Win the 2 that you're supposed to win this week in Stanford, and then win one of the other 3. What about you? Boston College, looking kind of at the schedule for the Eagles, it is still somewhat challenging because Syracuse has proven to be solid. SMU is really good. Brett Lashley's fantastic. And then you also have Pittsburgh at the end of the year. So kind of almost like a same dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, I think right now the goal is to get to 6-6. I mean, right now, if I was ever unlocked on ACC, I have some hot takes on some teams I think are frauds. I don't think SMU is a fraud. BC beat them last year. And it's crazy to see their quarterback, who looked like he was running through mud against BC in the bowl game. To see him as fast as he is now, like, that's going to be a major issue. 2 teams I don't believe in that BC still has. Actually, they have 3 that I still think they're very beatable. Syracuse, I don't believe in them. I'm sorry, I don't. They haven't played any. They played UNLV, but I still think they can be beat. They get BC at home. Yeah. I don't believe in Pitt. Pitt hasn't played anyone, and I know. Okay, so I'm just, and then I'm waiting for Mac Brown to have his November collapse because that's going to happen. So there's 3 games that they could come back and win. I'm not 100% sure they will, but I'm still positive about those games. I'm not positive about Louisville. I'm not positive about SMU. they got to go to Dallas for that game too, so that's gonna be tough.
Sure.
For BC, it's they could get bowl eligible if they can get this turnover stuff under control, because they're causing turnovers. They're one of the tops in the country. It's just they turn it over at a clip that's equal to that, and that's not sustainable.
Sure.
So 6-6, I think, would be pretty reasonable. And one of my hot takes will end up probably punching me in the face, right? Like one of those teams that are going to end up being like Kyle McCord throws for 500 yards or something. But
it always happens that way. It always happens that way for some unknown reason.
All right, let's wrap things up. We're out of time here. Dalton, where can people find you?
If you're watching, you can see at @defense_ underneath my face. If you're listening, at @defense_ is my Twitter. Be sure to check out all Locked On Louisville stuff that you can find on Twitter, whatever streaming service you utilize, and much more.
And you can follow me at Locked On Boston College. I also do the Locked On Boston postcast after every game. So on Friday night, I'll be posting a live episode from the press box. You can check me out there. Also on Eagle Insider, part of 247. You can also get me there. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. And this was great. And Dalton, good luck on Friday. We'll see you all again soon. For Dalton, this is AJ. Take care, everyone.